Chris, welcome to another Resilient Communities podcast brought to you by WCVA in association with the Talent Network. My name is Russell Todd. My day job, if you've listened to the other podcasts that we've done, you will know is on the Communities First support service, but also working to help engage the third sector with the current discussion paper that WCVA and Talent have recently made available called Resilient and Empowered Communities. I've done a couple of other podcasts. If you haven't found your way to those, there is a really interesting one looking at these sorts of topics within the context of the play sector with Marianne from Play Wales and Millie from the CBC in Conwy. And we also spoke with Chris Johns from Building Communities Trust and Anna Nicol, my colleague from WCVA, where we talked a little bit more conceptually and philosophically about what some of these terms actually mean and how we empower and how resilience can be brought about in communities. So I'm really pleased today to be at Sherman Theatre in Cydlynydd in Cardiff, where we're going to look at these topics from the perspective of the arts and the culture sector. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Gareth Coles and Guy O'Donnell. Hello.
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 Gareth, do you want to introduce yourself and just give a little bit of an explanation as to what your organisation does? And Guy, if you could follow likewise.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Gareth Coles. I'm the Director of Voluntary Arts Wales, and we're part of Voluntary Arts, which is a charity which operates across the UK and a little bit in the Republic of Ireland as well. We're essentially a support organisation for the voluntary community amateur arts and cultural sector. There are many thousands, possibly 4,000 such organisations here in Wales alone. So we provide support for that sector, information, training. We try to represent their interests at a sort of policy, government level, and we celebrate their achievements too through initiatives like the EPIC Awards, an annual celebration of excellence in the amateur arts sector. And we're partners in Get Creative, BBC and Arts Council initiative, to celebrate the creativity that happens every day in the UK. We also deliver projects on the ground, but most often in partnership, and I think I'll probably come on to talk about a couple of those examples shortly.
Hello, I'm Guy. I'm the Sherman 5 Co-ordinator here at the Sherman Theatre. Sherman 5 is generously supported by the Port Hamlin Foundation. It is at the heart of Sherman Theatre's work to generate diverse audiences. Sherman 5 gives people who face barriers and or face disadvantage and who have never attended a performance at the theatre the chance to do so. The project is open to residents of existing or former community first areas across South Wales, as well as community groups who represent people who face barriers or disadvantage in society. The scheme ensures that our performances are fully accessible to everyone in society. Members receive a free first visit ticket, and then tickets in the future are £5 or £2.50 for under 25, or they're 2 Spice 10 credits per person per show. We offer free transport. We also offer the opportunity for our members to volunteer, and they're called Sherman 5 reps. Our reps earn Spice 10 credits when they're volunteering, and they're supported to be ushers in our venue, and also support workshops, learn things like simple BSL phrases. They can become dementia friends, and we're really interested in hearing their stories about the barriers that they face in society and how we can collaborate with them to support access to our venue.
You mentioned Communities First. That's what I worked on and have done for a number of years, and I will try not to steal your thunder because I'm aware of some of the work that's been done in Cardiff in particular. So we're going to look at this through the prism of the arts, and it's in a theatre, a working theatre, a popular theatre, so there might well be some art and culture being captured on the mic.
I think there already has been.
To give it a sense of gritty realism. But you both have a wealth of examples of how arts and culture can be used to bring communities together. And one of the things that we have talked about, and certainly several of the responses that we've had to the discussion paper to date, have talked about the need to work with communities and across a community canvas, that we can no longer work with just individuals on an individual basis, looking at their individual needs, their issues, and helping them, as effective as that might be and as helpful for those individuals. One of the responses to the paper that we had from Action in Cairo and Ely, Ace, who you presumably will be familiar with, Guy, was talking about how there's a danger that we reinforce individualised aspects of society at a community level if we continue to do that. So this notion of bringing people together, I can think of any number of examples in my community's first sort of background and career where art has been at the heart of that.
Yes.
And you would presumably argue that would need to be a prominent element of programmes going forward and policy more broadly to build more empowered communities. Yeah.
I think there are at least a couple of strands, one of which is new initiatives that use the arts to engage communities in different ways. But I think I'm particularly interested in the existing resource that's there. I mentioned the sort of 4,000 odd arts, culture, heritage groups, many of them entirely voluntary run, exist without much public subsidy. but I think can play a part here and contribute to supporting community cohesion, supporting resilient communities, bringing people together as they do week in, week out. So we're talking about knitting groups, talking about community choirs, and there's a lot of examples and there's a lot of research as well about the benefits for, say, social cohesion, and particularly for promoting both individual and community health and well-being as well. So we see the sector playing a role in these future programmes that we're discussing.
I think we act in a very similar manner to Gareth. What we've tried to do with the project is put our new members at the centre of our activity. There's a phrase, nothing about them without them. We try and kind of represent that in all aspects of the project. We are very aware that there are large groups of people in society that are excluded from cultural provision, or actually sometimes self-exclude themselves from that, and they think it isn't relevant to their lives. So we try and find the connection between people's lives and cultural provision and the work that goes on in this venue. That can be very, very diverse. That may be that they're deaf and they actually use BSL and they can work with us to support deaf members to come. It might be a parent and they've got young children and they just want to use the space socially. There's lots and lots of different reasons to open up. We try and see the venue as a civic hub. It's a cultural space for everybody in society, and I think it's often about us going out to communities and having conversations with them, learning about themselves as human beings, trying to spend time learning about what those barriers are, and then work with them in whatever way that might be. And I think there are multiple ways to do that, and there are multiple strands that we've tried to develop as part of the project, but it's definitely about putting that individual at the centre of that experience.
And so that to me sounds quite inclusive as well.
I would hope so, yeah. I think there's been lots of organisational learning for us as part of this project, because there are actually lots of people that face barriers and disadvantage in society that I think the building weren't really that aware of. I was chatting to Gareth just earlier then. We're doing a lot of work this season to work with blind audiences. There's a lot of learning for us just about where they live, the journey to the venue, transport barriers, physical barriers into the space, our marketing. So we're learning about large print, Braille, who uses Braille. There's conversation about it being a dying language, people using audio, listening to things. Is it on a memory stick? Is it on the internet? Is it on a CD? The types of work that we have in our venue. So there's lots of learning, and that's within all the sectors. So that's with deaf people, older people, young carers, people who have English as a second language, refugees and asylum seekers. So there's learning, all of those areas of learning for all of those audiences, and so it's quite broad. But I think the venue's really welcomed that change. There's been lots of really positive benefits, and the project's been embraced by everyone in the organisation because they can see the benefits. And I think where real change has occurred is where diverse citizens from across South Wales have been in our venue, and they've had the opportunity to chat to some of our staff, some of our existing volunteers, and you can see humans kind of sharing collective experiences, and that gives the opportunity then for myself and my colleagues to learn from those members in society who do face disadvantage and barriers, and how we can embrace them and support them to see more work in our venue in the future, and also to kind of value them as individuals. So when you see someone who is deaf and has never accessed the venue, and then we're then sharing videos of them reviewing our work and talking about things you can come and see at the venue, it sometimes changes your perception, and it kind of challenges barriers, I think, that you don't even realise that you have, or stereotypes, or I think there's a lot of kind of learning for the individual as well, and I think that's where we can see real growth and real change, and there's only been benefits really from us in terms of the project and the support and learning that we've achieved.
It's really interesting to Guy talk is really an example of a kind of co-productive approach, and you mentioned sort of nothing about us without us, yeah. and also obviously the time credit, so the Edgar Khan kind of theme is clear throughout, and I feel like there's been a recent shift in the arts community in Wales that's kind of alongside, I guess, a public service policy discussion about more co-productive ways of working. That's more about involvement and genuine participation, where everyone within a space can contribute equally. Hierarchies are flattened, everyone is an artist within a space. There's more focus on this kind of wider ecology of creativity with professional arts organisations at the one end of the spectrum, but very much kind of interdependent with the kind of creativity that people choose to practice themselves, do on their kitchen table, in their bedroom, and it's all interrelated. And this has always been happening, but it's more recognised, and it's, in some cases, as in Guy's example, I think it's kind of reshaping how some arts provision is organised.
Yeah, I think that's very true. We've done some work with communities that are geographically close to our venue. So we did a project most recently called Love Cardiff, which was we engaged with communities along City Road, which is one of the most diverse communities probably in the world, really. So we worked with Cardiff Story Museum on that project, some local arts groups in Roath, and we then worked with them to create a production which was on our play. So citizens from across Cardiff told their stories about City Road on our stage, and their communities then came to see their work, and I think it shifted it because it gave validity to their stories. Because we presented them on our main stage, we supported them as professionals, so it was exactly the same as another production. It had a real transformative effect on them and some of our staff to see them on our stages. Their friends and their networks came in, and I've never seen the venue more alive and more diverse. It was a real kind of joyous celebration of Cardiff, and we had kind of white working class Cardiffians talking about Cardiff in the 60s to boxers who, like an Iraqi boxer who trains locally, a real cross section of society, and it was really great to see that. And they have then continued to support us as an organisation. It's helped us to diversify our audience. We did a project where some of the articles within their lives that were important to them were exhibited in our venue, and that some of that information has gone into an archive with Cardiff Story Museum. And I think, as Gareth's saying, it's that shift then of kind of seeing the value of the citizens of South Wales, and also kind of just reaffirming and discussing what public funding is. And it can be the citizens' stories on our stages, and as it is tonight, it can be contemporary English language opera, on our stages. And so it can be all of those things. It can be really broad, and I don't think there's any reason that new audiences can access family work, they can be on our stages. And I think if we embrace that change and we embrace new audiences, if we embrace the opportunities that they can bring to our organisation, we can only benefit from that.
It strikes me that it's almost a different sort of medium, the technique even, for people to articulate what some of their issues are, some of their concerns, articles or artefacts that are of value to them, to communicate those things, rather than what can sometimes be the traditional, usual, safe way of, let's have a public meeting and it's a committee and it's a questionnaire. As well intended as those are, that this gives people another way of expressing themselves. When you look at the sensory and the linguistic barriers that might exist, irrespective of institutional barriers and people's disability and accessibility to venues and things, then art can be a way that navigates some of those obstacles.
One of the things I wanted to mention is research that was published just this year. I think it was coordinated by the University of Kent, that found that people who engaged in the arts were more likely to sort of contribute to civil society, essentially. And I think if one of the characteristics of a resilient community is sort of a civic contribution, then obviously arts engagement has a role to play. So this research found that people who did engage and participate in the arts were more likely to volunteer their time and more likely also to donate to charity. We see that in practice with community groups right across Wales. They provide opportunities for people, say, who are at risk of social exclusion or maybe who've suffered bereavements, to engage in meaningful activity and then build links amongst society, amongst community, with people who they wouldn't have met in any other circle. But they're all focused on the kind of creative activity, which does bring different sections of communities of place together.
Yeah, I think that's very true. We've noticed that we support all our Sherman 5 members to become volunteers, that we call Sherman 5 reps. We support them and give them training in things like health and safety. They're very often ushers for our performances. That has benefits in terms of if we have new audiences attending and they see staff in our venue who are ushers that are like them in some way, they go, actually there's a connection between me and my world, it's not all white middle class people in this venue. And then there's also a range of other additional benefits which we at the time we didn't realise and we kind of learned. So sometimes one of the tasks our ushers do is just to help us with a mail out, which is basically just helping us put some flyers into an envelope. But we work with quite a lot of groups that's public with mental health issues, and they find that it's quite a calming activity. It's extremely beneficial to us as a venue. It's a social activity, so we often get them a cup of tea, have a bit of cake, they have a chat, and they forge new friendships. And they often ask to come in together. And a lot of the agencies that support those individuals have come back to us and said, they keep saying, can they come and do more mail outs? And we kind of think, that's quite a simple task, but actually the benefits are huge to those individuals. And then some of those people then have gone on to represent our project out at library spaces because their confidence has grown, they feel confident in relation to us as the venue, they'll tell their friends and their networks, well actually the Sherman Theatre cares about you, come and see all the different players here. So it markets and it develops our reach, but actually the benefit it gives to that citizen who's volunteering their time is huge. And I think actually realistically that we really haven't tapped into the potential of that. I think there's a lot more that we could do with reps in Cardiff and across South Wales in lots and lots of different ways. And I think once you've got a range of people across the city kind of saying, oh, actually the Sherman Theatre's for you, culture's for you. Actually, just over the last couple of days, we've got one of the mothers who are part of the project. She often organises trips for the community. So I know over the summer they went to Folly Farm. So I got in touch with her and said, you know, are you interested in supporting some people to come and see one of our Christmas shows? So she's got 100 people. So I couldn't reach 100 people, and she's a mum in St Mellons. No disrespect to any mums in St Mellons, but her network is huge. So I need 4 people like Emma, and I filled the main stage in the theatre. So I can't do that without those citizens who are giving up their time to say to their friends, actually cultural provision and volunteering your time in the Sherman Theatre is a benefit. She's a really important person now. She's kind of like a local legend. It's kind of Emma's the person to go to if you want to go on the trips. So if we can identify those citizens and work with them, I think it makes a massive difference to us, and I know it makes a massive difference to their lives. I've spoken to some of our volunteers who've actually gone from working with 10 credits, working with volunteering, where they've gone from being really excluded, isolated lives. They've done a litter pick, they've got involved in some of our volunteering, some of them have done evening classes, they're doing degrees, they're about to leave the work in the youth sector. So this journey that we're a tiny part of makes a massive difference to their lives, and I think cultural provision can support that mosaic of opportunities for lots of citizens across the UK. And it's just how if we have an open conversation about cultural provision and where we can support those citizens, the benefits to society and probably the cost saving to society is actually huge, because some of those parents now realise the value of education to their children's lives. They say, no, you must stick in at school, it's really important to you, come and see this play. I know one of the girls then went off to do a degree because there was actual realised change within her life because of the mum. She had turned her life around, and you know, Sherman 5 wasn't responsible for that alone, but because we work with a sector of providers, it creates demonstrable change in people's lives in society. So it's lovely to kind of be part of that.
Which is those examples you talked about there. It's Emma, it's that lady's daughter. Those are the people, the library time that you said, or the library space that people go back to. At a very neighbourhood level, that's the civil space that you're talking about. It sounds a bit abstract. And
yeah, I would totally echo guys' examples there. You know, we're doing some work in Rhondda and Merthyr Tydfil about the benefits to the maintenance of good mental health, regular participation in creative activities. So we're working with a number of different existing community groups and some new groups as well. So we've got craft, dance, singing in the valleys, obviously community choirs, but you see these links develop. So a lot of the provision happens within church halls, or the singing links with the church are quite clear. There's a contribution to food banks there. All this kind of civic participation, once you sort of scratch the surface, it exists, and those links are quite strong. So what's, I think, interesting here is we're not talking about setting up brand new initiatives that deliver something. We're talking about this amazing resource that exists, and that social capital that exists that can be tapped into, and with a little of recognition, maybe a little bit of support, there's a huge contribution that arts and cultural provision can make to resilient communities, to improving the well-being of citizens and communities right across Wales.
It taps into a huge amount of voluntary existing, is the point you're stressing, existing voluntary efforts.
Yeah.
And things like time credits, there's models whereby financial values can be placed on that.
That's right.
It's more than just a financial value, of course. Because what you're not talking about is funding and programmes, and it can become a bit of a mindset that we can. Yeah. There's a risk that we fall into, that this has to be sort of funding from the public purse that is bequeathed to programmes, and but it's tapping into what's already going on.
Yeah. I think it's quite clear in areas like health and well-being, and I appreciate we're straying a little bit from the kind of policy area here, but there's a real attention and focus on the contribution of the arts to health at the moment, at a UK level and particularly in Wales. But it is that sort of preventative agenda that a lot of the work we're seeing now with existing community groups, people are at risk maybe of developing lower level mental health problems because they're isolated, because maybe they're unemployed or they suffered a bereavement. But just that contact with a group can change that, and who knows what the consequences would have been, but almost certainly there would be a financial benefit to the public purse for joining your community choir on that Thursday night, going along to the craft club on a Saturday morning. That's unquantified, but it's going to be considerable.
Yeah, I agree. I was just reading some of the paper and I picked out the section which it completely parries with the work that we do as part of Sherman 5, and it says, if the core feature of a resilient community is community engagement, people who come together to do things together, to get to know each other and support each other, and the key outcome is likely to be improved well-being, as Gareth said. This affects health and quality of life, and individuals are more resilient when they are part of a resilient community. I would hope that as Sherman 5, we are a community in of itself, and we are so supporting resilient communities. So I think we underscore all of these discussions. Obviously I'm slightly biased, but that's the benefit of cultural provision. We support mental health, we support volunteering, we support great art, access, all of the areas I think that are discussed within the Resilient and Empowered Communities discussion paper. We fulfil them all.
And I think if you look at it, and there's a danger, you empower communities pushed by powering a series of individuals. I'm not quite sure personally that is a logical result, but talking about it in an individual context, resilience is improved confidence, it's broader social networks, it's being able to express themselves, it's coming together, literally in an artistic sort of space, or in any space for that matter, but to share sort of common issues. All of those things are important on an individual level, and they're all things that you've sort of said happen, and it's not, in no way feels contrived. I think most people listening to this will kind of go, that time where I went to watch made me feel better, made me feel more expressive, made me feel more passionate about a particular topic, the inclusivity of it as well. And it's not enough just to sort of say if it happens with lots of individuals, then it aggregates up. I think you have to do work to continue to bring people together, to mobilise that collective action. It feels quite intuitive, actually, to do more of this stuff. It's a good thing because it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the groups we work with, people are there just because they love that creative activity. They're a member of the choir because they love singing. And the benefits then stem from that. But it's almost a kind of a byproduct of that just sort of core interest in the creative activity. And one of the things I was thinking of as we were talking is, what is distinctive about kind of the arts here that might be different from other forms of people and communities coming together in different settings, sports or, down the pub or something. And one of the things that I was talking about earlier was exposure to culture does change your worldview, does change your kind of view of yourself. And Guy, you'll probably say this better than me, but your view of others opens up considerations of other communities and so on. So there is something, I think, distinctive offer for arts and culture there. And then another thing I suggest is that when you're participating in a creative activity, you're there for that activity. So sometimes the conversation shoulder to shoulder with someone when you're working on something is easier than something in an institutional setting that's about, for example, a health condition. It's a lot easier to have that conversation when you don't have to almost. Some of the people talk about that's their time in the week when they're taking part in a creative activity. Free from caring responsibilities just for that 1 or 2 hours, free from any other responsibilities at work or looking for work or whatever it may be. It's really important fulfilling time for themselves, and that's satisfying and important and incredibly valuable in and of itself.
As Gareth was chatting, then we in our programme we sent to put some quotes in from our members, and one of the quotes from one of the parents just said recently, all adults and children should have a chance to go on adventures and explore the complexities of humanity from the comfort of a theatre seat. Well, if we offer an opportunity for people to identify and explore the complexities of humanity, that's a lovely little strapline to give, and I think we offer those opportunities. And I know that Suzanne, who's actually the mum I was talking about, she volunteers across Cardiff. She is one of those individuals, I think, who is resilient. She exemplifies many of the characteristics which are kind of in the report, and I think only through working with those resilient citizens that we can really create some change within our society. Really, we were interested in kind of diversifying the audience and just giving those citizens a platform to say, well, actually, your opinion is of equal value to anyone in society. I recently was chatting to one of our families and I was asking them what they thought of the play afterwards. And one of the children, she's about 16, Shannon, she said, oh, actually, yeah, because in Sherman 5, you're interested in what we think. I think she feels as though people aren't interested in her opinion, and they were then, her and her mum were then chatting about the play they'd seen, and the daughter loved it, and the mum hated it, but she said it's great for us to kind of go away as a family, which we'll chat about it. The particular play was actually about the history of coal mining in South Wales, and they would then talk about history, and they talk about their grandparents, and there's this huge discussion just from coming to this act of drama on our play. So it's kind of to be there and kind of to allow that learning and to have those conversations happen and for those kind of family bonds to develop is a real benefit, I think, of having this sort of activity in a cultural space.
And not feeling listened to. It can be very disempowering.
Yeah.
We've talked in the podcast with Anna and Chris about how does empowerment happen. You can flip it on its head, and we can all think of any number of instances through service provision, service design, any number of ways in which actually we felt quite disempowered. Sort of conversations being listened to.
Yeah.
These aren't complex. What was the phrase? Complexities of humanity. These are very simple, in some respects, things that we want to achieve, or that we want to do, and how we want to engage with people.
Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes organisations can, without realising, they disempower, and that's not intentional. It's just they're quite busy, the capacity might be limited, they have to deliver on their aims and objectives, and the consultation, the discussions they have with their members is a little bit facile, and it isn't really as in-depth. And there's also, if you're working with resilient communities, there's a big risk. There's a risk for our resilient communities, if that's what we call it, accessing things that are new to them. There's a risk from venues going into spaces where they don't know what the answer is going to be. So it's really positive to try and have spaces where you can kind of share opinions. We say as part of this project, we don't mind if you hate the play. It's not, you're not in school, you can leave. But we're interested in your opinions. And I think if you can create a space where you can have that dialogue, there's huge benefit to actually doing that.
And it's what you said at the start, Gareth. Art space, creative space can be non-hierarchical. The hierarchies are removed. It can
absolutely.
be much more equal. I'm not sure if that's the word.
In terms of participatory arts practice, or even as an audience, you can be sitting with a chief executive, you can be sitting with someone who's never been to the theatre before, but your opinions are equally valid. So it creates that commonality for everyone in terms of, what did you think? And then you have really interesting conversations, and you kind of don't really know where that'll lead.
And I was thinking, again, for the groups that we work with and see regularly, there's probably a couple of stages towards empowerment. From initially joining a group, it might be just building links, building friendships, and crucially, I think, building trust. And then those links go beyond that particular setting. And then you maybe get to empowerment. A couple of groups in Pontypridd I was talking to recently, people who come who maybe haven't left their house in years. And it's a huge deal for them to come and to take off their coat to say a few words at this group. And it takes, quite a skilled and thoughtful group leader not to force that. But they come back. And then there was a craft group who did a trip to buy some new materials. And it was the first shopping trip that one woman had been on for many, many years, because she trusted the people she was with. And suddenly, there's someone who can begin to participate in social activity again and contribute to society. It's sort of not instrumental in the sense it's not designed for that, but it is an outcome of these groups.
We've had a small element of that as well, where we've supported people to become independent. So as a project, we give them a lot of initial support to access the provision here at the venue, so we can organise a coach or a taxi to pick up someone from the house and come. But then we also try and say to those citizens, can you get here by yourself? And so some people sometimes have very little experience of that, and it's kind of new to us, so that we've had people that live in Barry, I've used Catay's train station, are actually finding coming to Cardiff quite difficult. So for me, that's quite surprising for me, but obviously I'm not that aware. So when we have people who, they're completely making that journey independently, they're wandering to Cardiff, they're going to Queen Street, they've gone to other cultural spaces, there's been a real change within their lives. So there's all of those benefits to those individuals, where they feel more empowered, they feel they're less risk averse, and they'll give something a try. I've seen people who've kind of gone from quite excluded, insular lives to someone where I'll go, they're kind of pushing me and say, well, get in touch, guy, you should do it. And there's a complete change again. And these are all kind of secondary positive benefits of the main area of our project. And
establishing trust does seem to be key towards that, that empowerment.
People who are currently living in community-first areas have faced a lot of challenges in their lives. I know lots of our Sherman 5 members who are lovely, lovely people. They face petty crime on almost like a daily basis, unfortunately. They face lots of challenges, and some of them, they're almost, just because of the way they geographically live, there's loads of challenges that are presented to them that I don't face as an individual, although we're the same. There's no real difference to them. But it's kind of like frustrating to me. We share a lot of information with our members on social media. We have quite open conversations, and sometimes they wanted to come and say a show and the windscreen was smashed, and it's like, and they've got to then sort all that out. And the kid was in the car at the time, and it's just like, how do you become resilient if you're facing all these challenges and they're just like normal people? But because of all of the issues kind of within their area, it obviously makes it a lot more difficult for them actually to come out.
I think trust is a key point. I think it's probably a key point to wrap up on as well. And trust often is lacking on both sides to oversimplify things. It's not just that communities don't trust authority figures, certain institutions, public service providers, etc. Often they don't trust some of the communities and the people in the communities that they're working in either, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And it is a complex,
Yeah.
and there's sometimes historical throwbacks and legacies of those things. But
there was one other point I've been thinking about recently, and that's about the Welsh language as well. And I think this sector is one where bilingualism kind of happens quite happily. A lot of the groups I've seen, if speaking English or speaking Welsh, if you meet another Welsh speaker, you just lapse into Welsh. That happens well, but of course the clear example is choirs. So many choirs throughout the country perform in English, they perform Welsh songs, whether they're Welsh speakers or not. And there it's celebrating. Bilingualism is really, really celebrated. Appreciate we're straying into another strategy of Welsh Government with a long-term aim, which generated an awful lot of debate recently. But it's nice, just as a counter to some of that debate, is that there are groups throughout Wales who celebrate and operate bilingually quite happily.
And there would be a great many communities in Wales where resilience would be defined, or component and ingredient of that would be reversing language decline.
Yeah.
So I don't think it is a huge stretch, actually. I think we'll wrap it up there. I'm off to practice my vocal scales. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Very tempted, could have gone on for another couple of hours. The paper is still available on the website. These podcasts will still be available. If you want to record a little vlog, a spoken piece to your mobile phone or to your tablet, what you think makes a resilient community, what you think brings about empowerment, then we would still welcome those from people. There'll be some more podcasts coming along very, very soon. And we'll also take some good old-fashioned written responses to the discussion paper that's available on WCVA's website and on the Resilient Communities Hub page. If you want to follow the conversation on social media, the hashtags are Resilient Communities, and then in Welsh, Cymunedau Cryf, and we encourage you to get involved. So until next time, gentlemen, diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.